At my husband's company gala, the guard glanced at me and said, "Sorry, guests wait outside." Inside, my husband smirked, whispering, "You wouldn't fit in here anyway." Every other spouse sat proudly beside their partner. I watched him laugh with his assistant, then quietly opened my phone, sent one message to the board and walked out as everything began to unravel. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. This is a private event." The security guard at the Meridian Grand Hotel placed his hand on my shoulder, physically moving me away from the entrance where my husband Owen had just walked through, laughing with his assistant Natalie. I stood there in my emerald dress, watching through the glass as every other spouse took their seats at decorated tables while I was left standing in the corridor like hired help. The humiliation burned, but what hurt more was that I'd seen this moment coming for weeks, maybe months. The signs had been there in our cramped Boston apartment, in the way Owen had started treating my contributions to his work like they were expected rather than extraordinary. Just this morning, I'd woken at 4:30 a.m. while Emma still slept, opening Owen's laptop to review his quarterly presentation for Vertex Industries. The budget projections were wrong, off by $3 million due to a formula error that would have made him look incompetent in front of the board. I fixed it as I always did, adding the corrected graphs and updating the data visualizations that would make him shine. If you believe talented women deserve recognition for their work, not erasure, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps share these important stories. Now let's see how Lucy reclaims her power. 3 years ago, I was the one standing at podiums presenting my supply chain algorithms to packed conference rooms. Owen would sit in the front row taking notes, asking me afterward to explain the technical details he didn't quite grasp. Now those same algorithms, refined and perfected through countless late nights at our kitchen table, were being presented as his innovations. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in this corridor, that the very systems keeping Vertex Industries competitive were created by someone who wasn't even allowed in their celebration. Emma's 7th birthday last week had been the first crack in my carefully maintained composure. She'd been talking about the robotics kit for months, showing me pictures from the catalog, explaining how she would build a robot that could help mommy with her coding. When Owen arrived 2 hours late with a generic drugstore card and a chocolate bar, her face fell in a way that broke something inside me. "Daddy forgot," she said quietly, and Owen just shrugged, muttering about being busy with important work stuff. The important work stuff I knew was my work. The algorithm I'd developed to optimize Vertex's inventory management, the predictive modeling system that had saved them millions, the automated reporting dashboard that Owen couldn't even explain without my notes. While he was supposedly too busy to remember his daughter's birthday, I'd seen the Uber receipts for downtown restaurants, always for two, always at places I'd never been. The Cartier receipt had been my confirmation. I'd found it 3 weeks ago while doing laundry, tucked into his gym bag like he'd forgotten it was there. $8,000 for a watch. The same week he'd told me we couldn't afford Emma's summer science camp, the one focused on coding for kids, the one that would have given her the education I wished I could provide myself if I wasn't so exhausted from doing Owen's job plus my own consulting work just to keep us afloat. My mother had tried to warn me last month. She'd called late on a Tuesday night, her voice careful and measured. "Lucy dear, I saw Owen today. In Cambridge at that French restaurant you mentioned wanting to try." My heart had stopped because Owen was supposedly in Chicago for a critical client meeting. "He was with someone," she continued. "That pretty blonde from his office. The one from the Christmas party. Natalie Frost. 26 years old, Harvard MBA, hired as Owen's assistant 6 months ago. I'd met her exactly once at that Christmas party, where she'd looked through me like I was furniture while gushing about Owen's brilliance. Now through the ballroom glass I watched her lean into him, her hand on his arm, wearing the Cartier watch I'd found the receipt for. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our joint credit card statements. There they were, charges I'd overlooked in my trust. The Ritz-Carlton downtown on nights he was working late. Dinner for two at restaurants he told me were client meetings. A jewelry store charge from yesterday that he hadn't even bothered to hide. The pattern was clear, laid out in transaction history like a map of betrayal. "Excuse me, ma'am, you need to move further back," the security guard said again, more forcefully this time. Through the glass, Owen turned and our eyes met. For a moment his expression flickered. Surprise, maybe even shame. But then he leaned toward Natalie and said something that made her look at me and laugh. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read his lips clearly. You wouldn't fit in here anyway. 7 years. 7 years of waking before dawn to fix his mistakes, of sacrificing my career so he could build his, of being told we needed to invest in his future because it was our future. I'd believed him when he said that once he made senior VP I could restart my career, maybe even launch my own consulting firm. I'd trusted him when he said my support was temporary, that we were building something together. But standing in that corridor watching him toast his success with champagne I'd never tasted, surrounded by colleagues who didn't even know I existed, I understood the truth. I wasn't his partner. I was his unpaid employee, his invisible advantage, the brain he borrowed while keeping all the credit, and now apparently the younger, blonder upgrade on his arm. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma's babysitter. She's asking when you'll be home to practice coding with her. Another promise I'd have to break because I'd spent the afternoon preparing Owen's Monday presentation while he was supposedly at the office but actually, according to his location services, at Natalie's apartment. I looked once more through those glass doors at the world I'd helped build but would never be welcomed into, then turned and walked toward the exit, my heels echoing in the empty corridor. The next morning arrived with a doorbell that shouldn't have been ringing at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Natalie Frost standing in our hallway, her cream-colored designer suit pristine against the peeling paint of our apartment building's corridor. She held a leather folder and wore that same Cartier watch, her perfume, something expensive and French, filling our entryway. I need Owen's signature on these quarterly reports, she said, already pushing past me without invitation. Her eyes swept our living room with barely concealed disdain, taking in the second-hand couch, Emma's toys scattered on the worn carpet, the stack of coding books I used as a makeshift monitor stand. He forgot to sign them yesterday when we were reviewing the presentation. I stood there in my old MIT sweatshirt, the one with the coffee stain I hadn't had time to wash, watching her manicured fingers tap against the folder. She moved through our space like she belonged there more than I did, her heels clicking against our scratched hardwood floors. Owen's in the shower, I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. She turned to me then, really looked at me for the first time, and her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You know, Owen deserves so much better than this, she said, gesturing vaguely at our apartment. But her eyes stayed on me when she said it, and we both knew she wasn't talking about our living situation. Better than what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Someone who understands his world. His ambitions. She set the folder on our coffee table, right on top of the algorithm sketches I'd been working on for Owen's next project. Someone who can stand beside him at events, not wait in parking lots. The reference to last night's humiliation was deliberate, calculated. She knew I'd been turned away. Of course she did, she'd probably suggested the guest list herself. After she left with Owen's signatures, obtained while I stood in the kitchen pretending not to notice how his hand lingered on hers during the handoff, Emma came padding out of her bedroom. She was already dressed for school, her backpack dragging behind her. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy come to my school stuff anymore?" she asked over breakfast, pushing her cereal around the bowl. "Lily's dad came to the science fair yesterday. And Marcus's dad helps with reading time." I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart. Owen had missed her last 3 school events, including the parent-teacher conference where Mrs. Patterson had specifically requested both parents attend to discuss Emma's advanced placement in mathematics. "Daddy's very busy with work, sweetheart," I managed, the lie tasting bitter. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside at drop-off that morning, her expression concerned. "Mrs. Mercer, I need to update our emergency contact information. Your husband called yesterday and said if we can't reach you we should call Ms. Frost. He said she's his executive assistant and could handle any emergencies." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. He did what? He also mentioned she might be picking Emma up occasionally. I wanted to verify with you first, of course. I felt sick. Natalie Frost, who'd stood in my living room hours ago telling me I wasn't enough, was now on my daughter's emergency contact list. The violation of it, the presumption, the careful planning behind Owen's back. It all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. That evening, while Owen showered after another late meeting, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I knew his passcode, Emma's birthday ironically, and what I found destroyed any remaining delusions about my marriage. Text after text between him and Natalie, planning their future together, Once his situation was handled. That's what I was now. Not a wife, not a partner. A situation requiring handling. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore, Natalie had written. Soon, Owen had replied. After the promotion goes through. Lucy won't fight it if I frame it right. She never fights anything. My phone rang then, startling me. It was Owen, panicking from his office. Lucy, thank God. The algorithm's malfunctioning. The entire inventory system is showing errors, and I have the board presentation tomorrow morning. You have to fix this. Please. The desperation in his voice would have moved me once. Now it just sounded like opportunity. I drove to our apartment's makeshift office, really just a corner of our bedroom, and logged into Vertex's system remotely. The error was simple, a corrupted database entry that had cascaded through the system. As I repaired it line by line, I made a decision. Deep within the code, in places Owen would never think to look, I began embedding my digital signature. Not just my initials or a timestamp, but complex cryptographic proof of authorship that only someone with advanced programming knowledge would recognize. Every function, every algorithm, every innovation I'd created now carried my hidden mark. If I ever needed to prove ownership, these breadcrumbs would lead directly back to me. Fixed, I told Owen over the phone an hour later. You're a lifesaver, he said, relief flooding his voice. I don't know what I'd do without you. Apparently you're figuring that out, I said quietly, but he'd already hung up. Margaret arrived an hour later, holding a bottle of wine and wearing the expression of someone delivering bad news. We'd been friends since college, and her husband Daniel worked in Vertex's accounting department. Lucy, I need to tell you something, she said, not even waiting until she was fully inside. Daniel overheard the executives yesterday. Owen's getting promoted to senior VP next month. That's good, I said mechanically, though nothing about Owen's success felt good anymore. There's more. Margaret poured us both wine with shaking hands. Natalie's being promoted too. Direct report to Owen, with a salary that's completely unprecedented for her experience level. Lucy, they're not even trying to hide it. Everyone knows. Everyone except the wife who'd built the very systems that made Owen valuable enough to promote. Everyone except the woman who'd sacrificed her own career, who'd spent countless nights debugging code while Owen slept, who'd created innovations that saved Vertex millions while receiving not even a mention in the company newsletter. I stared at the wine in my glass, dark red like the anger I'd been suppressing for months. Here's maybe. Margaret squeezed my hand, and in that moment I made a decision. I wouldn't be a situation to be handled. I wouldn't be the invisible woman behind Owen's success anymore. 2 weeks after Margaret's visit, the invitation arrived in our mailbox on a Thursday afternoon. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing, the Vertex Industries logo gleaming at the top. I ran my finger over the text. Mr. Owen Mercer is cordially invited to the annual Vertex Industries Excellence Gala. Just his name. Not Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, not Owen Mercer and guest. Just him. I set it on the kitchen counter where Owen would see it, then picked up the phone and dialed his office. Grace answered on the second ring, her usually cheerful voice immediately becoming strained when she heard mine. Hi Grace, I'm calling about the gala invitation. There seems to be an error. It only has Owen's name. The silence stretched so long I thought the line had disconnected. Then I heard it. Natalie's distinctive laugh in the background, followed by her voice saying something about avoiding awkward situations. Mrs. Mercer, Grace finally said, her discomfort palpable through the phone. I'm so sorry, but Mr. Mercer specifically requested a solo invitation. He said it would be better for networking. Networking, I repeated flatly. I'm really sorry, Grace whispered, and I could hear genuine regret in her voice. I tried to suggest. It's not your fault, Grace. I hung up before she could apologize again. That evening, Owen barely glanced at the invitation before sliding it into his briefcase. Big night coming up, he said, not meeting my eyes. The board will all be there. Important for the promotion. I know, I said. I'm planning to attend. His head snapped up. Lucy, it's really more of a business thing. Every other spouse will be there, Owen. I checked with Margaret. Daniel got a +1 invitation. Your situation is different. He was already walking away, the conversation over in his mind. But it wasn't over in mine. That night, while Owen slept, I went to my closet and pulled out the emerald dress my mother had worn to her own company celebrations decades ago. She'd been a software engineer too back when women in tech were even rarer. The dress still fit perfectly, its deep green silk catching the light like liquid jade. The night of the gala, Owen left at 6, claiming he needed to arrive early for prep work. I waited until 7 then called an Uber. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick in the back seat, watching the city lights blur past. The driver glanced at me in the mirror. Special occasion? You could say that, I replied. The Meridian Grand Hotel rose before me like a golden monument to corporate excess. Valets rushed to open doors for couples in evening wear, and through the massive windows, I could see the ballroom glittering with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements. I walked through the main entrance, my heels clicking against marble, and followed the signs to the gala. The security guard at the ballroom entrance was checking names on an iPad. When I approached, his expression was professionally blank. Name: Lucy Mercer. I'm Owen Mercer's wife. He scrolled, frowned, scrolled again. I'm not seeing you on the list, ma'am. There must be a mistake. I'm his spouse. I'm sorry, but if you're not on the list, you'll need to wait outside. These are the instructions I was given. His hand moved to my shoulder, firmly guiding me back from the entrance. Through the glass doors I could see everything. Round tables draped in white linen, executives laughing with their wives and husbands beside them. The mayor's wife sat at the head table. The CFO's husband was making a toast. And there, at a prominent table near the stage, sat Owen with Natalie beside him in a silver gown that caught the light like armor. Our eyes met through the glass. I saw him register my presence, saw the flash of panic quickly replaced by something harder. He leaned toward Natalie, whispered something. She turned to look at me, and I could read Owen's lips clearly as he spoke. You wouldn't fit in here anyway. Natalie's hand moved to his arm, proprietary and confident. She said something that made him laugh, and they both turned away, dismissing me as easily as the security guard had. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to pull it out. I began taking photos. Owen and Natalie together, her hand on his thigh under the table, the way he leaned into her when speaking. I documented the other couples, all seated together, proof that spouses were indeed welcome. My fingers flew across the screen, screenshotting the Vertex website's page about the gala being a celebration for employees and their families. Mrs. Mercer? Grace Chin materialized beside me, having rushed out of the ballroom. Her face was flushed, eyes wide with what looked like genuine distress. I'm so sorry about this. I tried to add you to the list, but Mr. Mercer explicitly. He explicitly what, Grace? She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. He signed documents last month. Official papers stating that all the algorithmic innovations in his department were his sole creation. The board doesn't know about your contributions because legally, on paper, they don't exist. My blood turned to ice. He signed away my work? I wasn't supposed to see them, but I process all his paperwork. Grace's voice dropped even lower. He threatened my job when he realized I'd read them. Said if I ever mentioned your involvement in any project, he'd have me blacklisted from the industry. Grace, There's more. She was practically whispering now. The Caldwell project 3 years ago? The one that saved the company during the merger? I know you did that work. Mr. Blackwood specifically asked Owen how he'd developed such an elegant solution, and Owen said he'd been working on it solo for months. Harrison Blackwood, the chairman of the board. I looked through the glass again and found him at the head table, his silver hair distinguishable even from a distance. As if sensing my gaze, he glanced toward the doors. Our eyes met for a moment and his expression shifted to puzzlement. He tilted his head slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. 3 years ago, I'd done private consulting for Harrison through a third party, fixing a critical issue with his personal investment portfolio's algorithm. He'd never known it was me. The contract was under my maiden name, all communication through encrypted channels. But he'd praised the work as genius-level problem-solving. Now he was looking at Owen's wife standing outside his company's gala, and I could see wheels beginning to turn in his mind. Grace squeezed my arm gently. Mrs. Mercer, you deserve so much better than this. As she returned to the ballroom, I remained in the corridor, my phone heavy in my hand, filled with evidence of my humiliation. But humiliation was transforming into something else, something cold and precise and powerful. 7 years of suppressed rage crystallized into absolute clarity. I opened my email and began typing a message to Harrison Blackwood, attaching a single photo, the algorithm I'd created for his portfolio 3 years ago, with my digital signature embedded in the code. I sent the email to Harrison Blackwood with trembling fingers, then walked away from the Meridian Grand Hotel with my head high. The next morning I woke with a singular clarity. If I was going to reclaim my life, I needed proof that would be undeniable. Not just screenshots or hurt feelings, but evidence so comprehensive that Owen's carefully constructed lies would crumble like sand. The first thing I did was visit an electronics store downtown. The clerk, barely out of college, helped me select recording software that was legal in Massachusetts. Single-party consent meant I could record conversations I was part of. I paid cash, installed it on my laptop that afternoon while Owen was at work, and synced it to capture any conversation within range of his home office. For 3 months I became two people. By day I was the perfect wife Owen expected. I ironed his shirts with the same precision I'd once applied to debugging code, getting the creases exactly right. I cooked his favorite meals, the rosemary chicken he loved on Mondays, the pasta arrabbiata for Wednesdays, the steak with béarnaise sauce for Fridays when he'd worked late, but came home smelling of Natalie's perfume. I smiled when he kissed my cheek absently, pretended not to notice when he guarded his phone like a state secret. By night I was someone else entirely. After Owen fell asleep, I'd slip into his office and photograph every document he brought home. Contracts, presentations, financial reports, all of them built on my work. I'd return to our bedroom and upload everything to an encrypted cloud server I'd created, naming it Project Liberation. Each file was time-stamped, cataloged, and cross-referenced with the original code I'd written. The recordings were the most damaging. 2 weeks into my surveillance, I captured Owen on a call with Natalie, his voice carrying clearly through the office door I'd left strategically cracked. "Lucy's algorithm is what got me noticed," he said, laughing. "She has no idea I've been putting my name on everything. Too trusting. That's her problem, brilliant mind, no business sense. When are you going to tell her about us?" Natalie's voice was tinny through his phone speaker. "After the promotion locks in. I'll frame it as mutual differences. She won't fight it, she never fights anything." I stood in the hallway, my hand pressed to my mouth to muffle any sound, the recording app on my phone capturing every word. It was during the second month that Nexus Dynamics found me. Or rather, I found them without meaning to. Unable to sleep one night, I'd been browsing coding forums when I stumbled upon a challenge posted anonymously. "Solve this logistics optimization problem. Significant opportunity for the right mind." The problem was complex. A multivariable supply chain issue that most programmers would need days to untangle. But I recognized the pattern immediately. It was similar to something I'd solved for Owen 2 years ago, only with additional complexity layers. I couldn't help myself. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar rush of problem-solving flooding through me. 2 hours later, I submitted my solution under a pseudonym. The next day, my personal phone rang with an unknown number. "Ms. Hawthorne." The voice was professional, confident. "This is Patricia Kelman, CEO of Nexus Dynamics. We posted that challenge and your solution was extraordinary." My heart stopped. I'd used my maiden name on the forum, but somehow she'd found me. "We've been watching your work for some time," Patricia continued. "The improvements you submitted to our public API 6 months ago? We know that was you. We'd like to offer you a position. Chief Innovation Officer, full recognition for all your work, and a starting salary of $450,000. I sank onto our bed, phone pressed to my ear. "You know about my situation? We know talent when we see it, regardless of whose name is on the paperwork. The offer stands when you're ready." The 3rd month brought unexpected grief. I was organizing evidence files when an email arrived with a subject line that made my chest tighten. "Remembering Dr. Sarah Weiss. My MIT professor, my mentor, the woman who'd seen potential in me when I was just a scared freshman, had passed away." The obituary described her groundbreaking work in machine learning, her dedication to supporting women in technology, her belief that brilliance should never be hidden. Emma found me sobbing at the kitchen table, the obituary still glowing on my laptop screen. "Mommy, why are you crying?" I pulled her close, breathing in her shampoo scent. "Someone very important to me died, sweetheart. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." I believe in you, Mommy, Emma said solemnly. You're the smartest person I know. That night I renamed my evidence folder. No longer just Project Liberation, but Project Sarah, in honor of the woman who taught me that hiding brilliance was the greatest tragedy of all. Jennifer, my friend from law school who now practiced family law, met me at discreet coffee shops throughout those 3 months. She'd review my evidence with the careful attention she'd once applied to constitutional law studies. This recording is admissible, she said during our final meeting, listening to Owen's confession through earbuds. The embezzlement evidence is solid. The digital signatures on your code will hold up in court. Lucy, you have enough here to bury him professionally and legally. What about custody of Emma? With evidence of financial crimes and the way he's been hiding assets? You'll get primary custody easily. Jennifer squeezed my hand. When are you going to use all this? I thought about the gala invitation sitting in our kitchen drawer, the one addressed only to Owen. Soon. There's one more performance I need to give. That night I watched Owen pack his briefcase for the next day, humming off-key while organizing papers he didn't understand. He had no idea that every document had been photographed, every conversation recorded, every lie documented. He kissed my forehead absently, already thinking about tomorrow's meetings, about Natalie, about his promotion. Big week coming up, he said. Bigger than you know, I replied, but he was already walking away. I woke at 5 a.m. on the morning of the gala, my stomach tight with anticipation. Owen slept beside me, unaware that I'd spent the last 2 hours perfecting the email that would dismantle everything he'd built on my work. Each attachment was meticulously labeled. 2017 under 2019 under 3.8 amendment savings SIP. 2024 under presented doc. 7 years of theft organized chronologically, with my digital signatures embedded throughout the code like fingerprints at a crime scene. The most damning piece sat at the top, a simple spreadsheet comparing Owen's promotion timeline with my creations. Every spike in his career corresponded exactly with something I'd built. The correlation was undeniable, the evidence overwhelming. Owen stirred at 6:30, reaching for his phone before his eyes fully opened. Big day, he murmured, scrolling through emails without looking at me. The biggest, I agreed, watching him from my pillow. He showered while I made his coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream, exactly how he liked it. When he emerged, his cologne filled our bedroom, the expensive one Natalie had probably picked out. He pulled on his custom-tailored tuxedo, the one that cost more than Emma's entire year of after-school programs. You look nice, I said, meaning it. He did look nice. Like the successful executive he'd become on the foundation of my work. Thanks. He adjusted his cufflinks, the platinum ones I'd given him for our 5th anniversary back when I still believed in us. Listen, about tonight. You'll be working late. I know. He paused, perhaps hearing something in my tone. But then his phone buzzed. A text from Natalie, I assumed from the way his face lit up, and the moment passed. Don't wait up, he said, kissing my forehead with lips that felt like a stranger's. The gesture was automatic, meaningless, like signing a document without reading it. I won't, I promised. He left at 3 p.m., claiming he needed to review presentations before the gala. I watched from our bedroom window as his car disappeared around the corner, then opened my laptop. The email to Harrison Blackwood sat in my drafts, scheduled to send at exactly 8:47 p.m., right in the middle of Owen's anticipated promotion announcement. Subject line: The real architect of Vertex's success urgent. The message itself was brief. Mr. Blackwood, you once praised my work as genius-level problem-solving. Tonight I'm solving one more problem. The attached documents prove that every innovation attributed to Owen Mercer was created by me, Lucy Hawthorne. The algorithms, the cost savings, the breakthrough solutions. All mine. I have recordings, code signatures, and documentation spanning 7 years. I thought you should know who really built your company's competitive advantage. A Hawthorne, formerly Mercer. Margaret arrived at 4 p.m. with a makeup bag and reinforcements in the form of Prosecco. Today we make you unforgettable, she announced, pulling me into our bathroom. She worked with the focus of an artist, contouring my cheekbones, defining my eyes with smoky shadow that made them look fierce rather than tired. When she finished with my face, she styled my hair into an elegant twist that showed off my neck, my MIT class ring catching the light when I moved. "The dress," she commanded, and I retrieved my mother's emerald gown from its hiding place in the guest room closet. "Owen said this was too much," I mentioned as I slipped it on. "Owen's an idiot," Margaret replied flatly, zipping me up. "You look like what you are, a force to be reckoned with." I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't the invisible wife who'd spent 7 years in shadows. She was someone else. Someone who belonged in boardrooms, on stages, at the head of tables. Margaret drove us to the Meridian Grand in her BMW, classical music playing softly through the speakers. "You know what you're doing?" she asked as we pulled into the valet area. "I'm taking back what's mine." "Good." She squeezed my hand, her wedding ring pressing into my palm. "Daniel's inside. He'll make sure people are watching when it happens." The hotel lobby was already buzzing with formally dressed guests heading toward the ballroom. I hung back, timing my approach. At 8:30, I walked toward the entrance where the same security guard from weeks ago stood with his iPad. "Ma'am," he started, recognizing me. "I know. Guests wait outside." I positioned myself where I had a clear view through the glass doors. Inside, Owen stood at the microphone, Natalie glowing beside him in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Harrison Blackwood sat at the head table, his phone face down beside his plate. Other board members were scattered throughout the room, champagne glasses raised as Owen began what was clearly his promotion acceptance speech. I pulled out my phone at exactly 8:46 p.m. 1 minute until my scheduled email would send. But I couldn't wait. My fingers moved across the screen, typing 4 words to Harrison Blackwood. "Check your email now." I hit send and watched through the glass as Harrison's phone buzzed. He frowned, picked it up, and his expression shifted from mild annoyance to shock. His eyes widened as he opened attachment after attachment. The CFO beside him noticed his reaction and leaned over. Within seconds, both their phones were out. Owen was mid-sentence, saying something about innovative solutions that pushed Vertex forward, when Harrison stood abruptly. The room fell silent. "Mr. Mercer," Harrison's voice carried even through the glass. "We need to discuss something. Now." Owen's confident smile faltered. Behind him, Natalie's hand moved to his arm, but he shook her off, his face draining of color as more board members checked their phones. The domino effect was beautiful. One phone lighting up, then another, until the entire head table was staring at screens showing 7 years of my work with my name digitally stamped throughout. Daniel, Margaret's husband, stood up from his table in accounting. "Is it true?" he asked loudly. "Has Owen been taking credit for his wife's work?" The ballroom erupted. Voices rose in confusion and outrage. Someone said, "The algorithms have signatures embedded in them." Another voice, "This goes back 7 years." Through it all, I stood in the corridor, visible through the glass doors, wearing my mother's emerald dress that Owen said was too much. Several people inside noticed me, pointing, whispering. Harrison's eyes found mine through the glass, and this time his nod wasn't puzzled. It was understanding. Recognition. Respect. Owen's gaze finally landed on me, and in that moment he knew. His house of cards wasn't just falling, it was being deliberately demolished, card by card, by the woman he'd told to wait outside. The ballroom doors burst open and Owen stumbled out, his polished composure completely shattered. His bow tie hung crooked, his face flushed red, and I watched the champagne flute slip from his fingers, crystal shattering across the marble floor in a constellation of broken pieces. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the corridor. "Lucy, what did you do?" His voice cracked, high and desperate, nothing like the confident executive who'd walked through these same doors hours earlier. His eyes darted between my face and my dress as if seeing me for the first time in years. "I stopped being invisible," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "By the way, I start at Nexus Dynamics on Monday. Chief Innovation Officer. They were particularly interested in the supply chain algorithm, you know, the one you've been presenting as yours for the past 3 years. His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Behind him, guests were flooding into the corridor, their formal wear rustling as they craned to see what was happening. I heard someone whisper, "That's his wife. The one who actually wrote everything." "You can't. This is corporate sabotage," Owen sputtered, reaching for legal terms he didn't understand. "I'll sue you for what?" "Telling the truth." I pulled out my phone showing him the email I'd sent. Every line of code has my digital signature. Every algorithm traces back to my laptop. Even your MIT thesis presentation. That was my work from grad school, just reformatted. Harrison Blackwood emerged from the ballroom then, his silver hair slightly disheveled, his expression a fascinating mixture of fury and something that looked almost like respect. He walked directly to me, ignoring Owen completely. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, using my maiden name deliberately. "That consulting work 3 years ago. The portfolio optimization for my personal investments. That was you." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Every line of it. I knew something was familiar about the coding style when Owen presented the Caldwell project. The elegance, the efficiency, it was identical. He turned to Owen with a look that could have frozen fire. "You told me you'd been working on it solo for months." "Mr. Blackwood, I can explain," Owen started. "Save it for the lawyers," Harrison cut him off. "Ms. Hawthorne, Vertex Industries owes you a substantial debt. I'd like to discuss bringing you on as Senior Technical Director, with full retroactive credit for all innovations." "That's a generous offer," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "But I've already accepted a position with Nexus Dynamics. They offered me something Vertex never did, respect from day one." The corridor suddenly filled with new voices, authoritative and urgent. 3 people in dark suits with FBI badges visible on their belts were walking briskly toward us, and I recognized the lead agent. Margaret's husband Daniel had mentioned his college roommate worked in financial crimes. "Natalie Frost?" the lead agent called out. Natalie, who'd been trying to blend into the crowd of guests, froze. Her silver dress suddenly looked like armor that couldn't protect her. "We need to speak with you regarding embezzlement charges at Vertex Industries and 2 previous companies." "This is insane." Natalie's composed facade cracked completely. "I haven't done anything. This is a setup." But the agents were already reading her rights, and Grace Chin was hurrying over with a laptop, showing the agents something on the screen. I caught a glimpse. Bank records showing the transfers Owen had made to accounts in Natalie's name, the same ones I'd documented. "She's done this before," Grace was saying to the agents. "At her last 2 companies. Always targets married executives, helps them hide assets while stealing from the company." Natalie's screams echoed through the marble halls as they led her away. "Owen said it was legal. He said it was consulting fees. This is his fault." Owen's face went from red to white. "She's lying. I don't know what she's talking about." "Really?" I pulled up the recording on my phone, his voice filling the corridor. "The transfers to Natalie need to stay hidden. Route them through the consulting budget." Harrison's expression darkened further. "Mr. Mercer, please follow me. The board will meet immediately." They disappeared into a conference room, but not before Harrison turned back to me. "Ms. Hawthorne, would you be willing to join us? We need to understand the full scope of the innovations you created." I followed them into a wood-paneled conference room where the entire board had assembled. For 3 hours they went through everything. Each algorithm was pulled up on screens, my digital signatures glowing in the code like neon signs. The CFO had brought in their head of IT, who confirmed that the embedded timestamps proved I'd written everything from my personal laptop, not Vertex systems. "This logarithmic optimization alone saved us $12 million over 5 years, the CFO said, looking at me with something approaching awe. "You wrote this?" "In my kitchen," I confirmed. While Owen slept. Owen sat at the far end of the table, shrinking smaller with each revelation. When they pulled up the recording of him admitting to stealing my work, he didn't even try to defend himself anymore. "Mr. Mercer," Harrison finally said, "your employment is terminated effective immediately. You'll forfeit all bonuses, stock options, and severance. We'll also be pursuing legal action to recover the funds transferred to Ms. Frost." "You can't do this," Owen whispered. "I have a family." "You should have thought of that before you stole from your family," Harrison replied coldly. "When they offered me compensation, retroactive pay for 7 years of unacknowledged work, the number they quoted made my breath catch. It was more than Owen had earned in his entire career at Vertex. "That's generous," I said, "but I'll need to have my lawyer review everything." "Of course." Harrison stood, extending his hand. "Ms. Hawthorne, I deeply regret that we failed to see what was happening. If you ever reconsider joining Vertex, I won't, I said simply. But thank you for finally seeing the truth. As I left the conference room, Owen tried to grab my arm. Lucy, please. Think about Emma. I pulled away from his touch. I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about showing her that no one has the right to steal your work, your credit, or your dignity. Not even her father. The corridor was still full of guests, all watching as I walked past in my mother's emerald dress. Some nodded respectfully. Others whispered to each other. Grace Chen caught my eye and mouthed thank you, and I realized my vindication had freed her too. Margaret drove me home from the hotel in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over me like a heavy blanket. When we pulled up to my apartment building, the lights were on in our unit. The babysitter's car was gone, which meant Owen had come home and sent her away. My phone showed 12 missed calls from him. I climbed the stairs slowly, my mother's emerald dress rustling with each step. When I opened the door, Owen was sitting on our second-hand couch, still in his tuxedo, his face buried in his hands. Emma's bedroom door was closed. She's asleep, he said without looking up. The babysitter said she was asking for you. I walked past him to Emma's room, cracking the door open. She was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, her dark hair spread across the pillow. I kissed her forehead gently, then closed the door and returned to face Owen. I'm moving to my brother's tonight, he said, his voice hollow. My lawyer will contact you about custody arrangements. Fine. He looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed. How long were you planning this? How long were you stealing from me? I countered. He had no answer for that. The next morning, Emma padded into the kitchen where I was making pancakes, her favorite Saturday breakfast. She climbed onto her usual chair, but her eyes went to Owen's empty seat. Where's Daddy? I set down the spatula and sat beside her, taking her small hands in mine. Daddy's not living here anymore, sweetheart. Why? Her lower lip trembled. Sometimes when people do things that aren't right, they have to face consequences. Daddy took credit for Mommy's work, and that wasn't honest. Like when Jake copied my math homework and got in trouble? The simplicity of her comparison made my chest ache. Yes, like that, but with grown-up work. Are you sad? She asked, studying my face with those serious brown eyes she'd inherited from me. I considered lying, giving her the comfortable answer. But she deserved truth. I'm sad for the daddy he could have been. The one who would have been proud of Mommy's work instead of taking it. But I'm not sad about the choice he made. That's his to live with. He thought about this, then nodded. Can you teach me coding today? Since Daddy's not here to interrupt. My heart cracked and mended all at once. Of course, baby. We'll start right after breakfast. By Monday morning, the story had exploded across financial media. Bloomberg ran a segment titled, The Invisible Wife Who Exposed Corporate Theft. CNN Money called it, The Algorithm Affair. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from the Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Forbes. I declined them all with the same message. My work will speak for itself. The only statement I gave was to a small women in tech blog that had supported female engineers for years. For 7 years, my contributions were erased. Today, I begin writing my own story at Nexus Dynamics. That's all that matters. Vertex Industries stock dropped 18% in early trading. Screenshots of my embedded code signatures were circulating on Twitter, with programmers marveling at how thoroughly I'd documented my ownership. Someone leaked the recording of Owen admitting to theft, and it went viral on TikTok with the hashtag #InvisibleWife. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice was tired, pleading, Owen's older brother, Marcus. Lucy, please. I'm begging you. Owen's lost everything. His accounts are frozen, no firm will hire him, he's staying in my basement. Can't you drop the charges? For the family's sake? For Emma. I let his words hang in the air before responding. Marcus, for 7 years I was erased. My work, my contributions, my very existence in Owen's professional life, all deliberately hidden. He made his choices. But he's my brother. And Emma's my daughter. She needs to see that stealing someone's work has consequences. I won't teach her that forgiveness means accepting erasure. His reputation is destroyed. Isn't that enough? His reputation was built on my work. It was always going to crumble. The only question was when. I hung up without saying goodbye. 7 years of invisibility had earned Owen more than just professional ruin. It had earned my complete indifference to his fate. Monday morning came with Boston sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. I dressed carefully. A navy suit that fit perfectly, my MIT class ring polished, my mother's pearl earrings that she'd worn to her own first day at IBM 40 years ago. Emma watched me getting ready, her eyes bright with pride. "You look like a boss, Mommy." "I am a boss, sweetheart." The Nexus Dynamics building was all glass and steel, modern architecture that spoke of innovation and transparency. Patricia Kelman met me in the lobby herself, her handshake firm and warm. "Lucy, we're so thrilled you're here. Your team is waiting in conference room A." When she opened the door, 20 developers rose to their feet and began applauding. The sound washed over me like warm rain after a 7-year drought. These weren't polite claps. They were genuine, enthusiastic, celebrating. Ms. Hawthorne, the lead developer, a young woman named Priya, stepped forward. "We've all studied your algorithms. The supply chain optimization, the predictive modeling. It's brilliant. We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" I repeated, my voice catching slightly. "Patricia showed us your work months ago when she was trying to recruit you. We've been hoping you'd choose us ever since." Priya grinned. "Nobody else thinks like you do. Your code, it's like poetry that actually works." An older developer named James added, "I've been in this field 30 years and your elegant solutions to complex problems, they're textbook material. Literally. MIT wants to use your algorithms in their coursework." Standing there, surrounded by people who saw my work, who knew my name, who celebrated my contributions, I finally understood what recognition felt like. Not stolen, not borrowed, not hidden behind someone else's name, but earned and acknowledged and celebrated. "Thank you," I managed, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. "Should we get to work?" Patricia smiled. "Your office is ready when you are. Corner suite, your name already on the door." As the team dispersed to their workstations, chattering excitedly about the projects we'd tackle together, I stood by the window overlooking Boston's skyline. Somewhere out there, Owen was probably in his brother's basement scrolling through job rejection emails. Somewhere, Natalie was meeting with lawyers about her embezzlement charges. Somewhere, Vertex was scrambling to understand the systems I'd built. But here, in this room where my name was known and my work was valued, I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months had transformed everything. I stood backstage at the Boston Tech Innovation Summit, my hands steady as I reviewed my presentation slides one final time. The algorithm I'd created, now properly credited to Lucy Hawthorne, had revolutionized logistics across retail, healthcare, and manufacturing. 3 industries, billions in savings, and this time my name was on every slide. "5 minutes, Ms. Hawthorne," the stage manager said, and I nodded, smoothing my black dress. Not emerald this time, but something I'd chosen for myself. The auditorium was packed, over 2,000 attendees waiting to hear about the innovation that Forbes had called the most significant supply chain breakthrough of the decade. As I walked onto the stage, the lights warming my face, I spotted familiar figures in the audience. Patricia Kelman in the front row, beaming with pride. Margaret and Daniel near the middle, both giving me thumbs up. And there, in a shadowed corner near the back, Harrison Blackwood. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the convention center. "I'm Lucy Hawthorne, Chief Innovation Officer at Nexus Dynamics, and today I want to talk about what happens when invisible work becomes visible." The presentation flowed perfectly. Every demonstration, every data point, every innovation properly attributed. When I showed the year-over-year improvements, someone in the audience actually gasped. During the Q&A, a young woman raised her hand. "Ms. Hawthorne, your story about being excluded from recognition has inspired so many of us. What advice would you give to women whose contributions are being overlooked?" "Document everything," I said without hesitation. "Trust your worth. And never let anyone tell you to wait outside a room you helped build." The applause lasted so long the moderator had to intervene. As I left the stage, an assistant handed me a bouquet of white roses with a card. "We should have invited you inside. Harrison Blackwood." I smiled, thinking of where those flowers would look perfect. Right next to my Nexus Employee of the Year award, the one my team had surprised me with last month. 2 weeks later, Emma's school science fair arrived with all the fanfare of a major production. She'd been working on her project for months, a simple app that helped kids learn coding through storytelling. I'd guided her when she asked, but she'd done the work herself, debugging with the patience I'd tried to teach her. And now presenting Code Tales by Emma Hawthorne, the principal announced. I watched my daughter walk to the microphone with a confidence I'd never possessed at her age. She explained her project clearly, demonstrating how narrative structures could teach logical thinking. Her presentation was polished but genuine, and when the judges asked technical questions, she answered without hesitation. Who inspired this project? One judge asked. Emma's eyes found mine in the crowd. My mom, Lucy Hawthorne. She's the smartest programmer in the world, and she taught me that code is just another way to tell stories. When they announced her first place win, she ran straight to me, trophy in hand. I did it, Mommy. And nobody can take credit for it but me. In that moment, I realized I'd broken the cycle. My daughter would never stand outside a door she deserved to walk through. She'd never let anyone claim her work. She'd never disappear into someone else's shadow. The email arrived exactly 1 year after the gala. The night everything changed. I recognized the email address immediately. omercer_ohio@gmail.com. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the delete button. But curiosity won. I opened it. "Lucy, I know you probably won't read this, but I need to say it. I'm working at my brother's Toyota dealership now in the service department. It's honest work at least. I see what I lost every time Emma's accomplishments show up on social media through mutual friends. I was a fool. I threw away the best thing in my life for an illusion of success. Natalie got 18 months minimum security. I got what I deserved too. A life without you and Emma. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I took from you. And I'm sorry. Owen." I read it twice, feeling nothing but a distant kind of pity. This man who'd once made me feel invisible was now truly invisible himself, working in obscurity in Ohio while I was reshaping entire industries. I clicked archive without responding. Some messages, like some people, deserved only silence. My office at Nexus occupied the southeast corner of the 42nd floor, walls of glass offering a panoramic view of Boston. But it was the western view that I treasured most. Every morning with my first cup of coffee, I could see the Meridian Grand Hotel 5 blocks away. The same building where I'd stood outside, barred from entry, watching my life's work credited to someone else. Sometimes I thought about that woman in the emerald dress, standing in the corridor with her phone in her hand, making the choice that changed everything. She felt like a different person now, someone I knew intimately but no longer was. That woman had been invisible, erased, waiting for permission to exist. The woman I'd become wrote her own permissions. A knock on my door interrupted my morning ritual. Priya entered with her tablet, excitement bright in her eyes. "Lucy, the Pentagon just approved our contract. They want to implement your algorithm across their entire supply chain. Set up the team meeting for this afternoon," I said, already thinking through the implementation challenges. As she left, I turned back to the window to my view of the Meridian Grand. Next month, Nexus would hold our own gala there. Patricia had asked me to help plan it, and I'd insisted on one detail. Every employee could bring anyone they wanted. No one would wait outside. I pulled out the invitation list I'd been reviewing. My name was at the top, followed by +1, Emma, who'd already picked out her dress. At the bottom of the list, I'd added one more name, Grace Chin, Owen's former secretary, who now worked in our HR department. She'd sent me a thank you note after I'd recommended her for the position. "You gave me the courage to stop being invisible too." The morning sun caught my MIT ring, sending small rainbows across my desk. In 6 months, I'd gone from standing outside to standing on stages. From being erased to being essential. From invisible to undeniable. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, can we work on my new app idea tonight? It's about women in tech who changed the world." "Of course," I typed back. "We'll start with Ada Lovelace and work our way forward." "And we'll end with you," she replied, followed by a heart emoji. I smiled, thinking about the woman I'd been a year ago standing outside that ballroom. She'd thought she was alone, defeated, erased. She had no idea she was actually standing at the beginning of everything. The woman who was told to wait outside had become the one everyone was waiting to see. And this time I held the guest list. If this story of sweet revenge had you cheering for Lucy, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Lucy stood outside that ballroom in her emerald dress, sending the email that changed everything. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.